Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the sixth edition of the Fast 5 sessions that we're hosting. This is a new initiative still from SMS Trustee News, giving SMSF members an insight into some of the best financial advisors in the SMSF community, along with the opportunity to ask them questions about any current issues that they have. Now, joining me in today's Fast 5 session, sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm Darren Tyson-Chan, editor of SMS Trustee News. And today I have Mark Rattigan with me. Mark is a director and senior advisor at Merideon Wealth Strategies. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the Fast 5, and thanks for joining us today. I know it's very early for you because Merideon Wealth Strategies is based in WA.
Luckily, not too early, given it's not daylight saving yet. But yes, just kicking off our day, getting my first coffee in. So excuse me if I'm not making any sense until I get a bit of caffeine happening.
You're making sense to us now, which is good. It's a good start. So we'll launch into it just to find out a little bit of your background and your involvement in the advice industry. So my first question is, how did you actually get involved with the SMSF sector?
Well, my first foray into, I guess, the financial space was about 2007. I started working as a stockbroker, and we were working with a lot of clients buying and selling the shares and doing investments inside their self-managed super funds. So I came across a lot of trustees, worked with a lot of them on their investment strategies and the investment side of things, but started to realise that there was a lot of missed opportunity there. I guess they were looking at the investment side of their self-managed super funds, but weren't really looking at the other parts of it as well. So it was more setting up a vehicle to allow them to trade shares or buy a property or something, and they weren't take into consideration all the other areas. So from there, I started getting interested in the self-managed super fund strategy side, did some specialist courses, and started to build out my knowledge and work on the strategic side of things as well, rather than the investment side. So from there, I actually left stockbroking world and set up Merideon in 2009. We're in a regional area just south of Perth in Mandurah. And my view was that I would start working with a lot of business owners. I had a good business network down here, working with them in their self-managed super funds and work that side of things. But what we found, the economy was going fairly poorly at that time. So there wasn't a lot of new ones popping up. And we actually found a lot of people who were coming to see us didn't need a self-managed super fund, weren't suited to running a self-managed super fund, didn't realise why they had it, what it was set up for. And at that time, other products were starting to allow them to do what they needed to do. So we had a lot of work closing down a lot of self-managed super funds and getting people set up in something that was easy to run because they didn't need that complexity in their life. So, so that's sort of how I've got into the space. We do work in self-managed super funds alongside all of our other clients as well. So do mainly strategic advice and use the self-managed super as a tool to utilise where people have that need for more complex control or management in their super.
Mm-hmm. And if you could nominate one or a couple, what's the most valuable advice that you've given a client?
When I saw this question, I sort of racked my brain a bit, because obviously there's a lot of wins that you get from helping people save a lot of tax, or moving properties into self-managed super funds and getting nominal stamp duty, those types of things. But I guess one of the ones I think that is the most powerful, the one that's the most overlooked, because they're fairly obvious strategies. I find people are good at doing what's good for them at the moment, but looking sort of further ahead and looking at what could go wrong and those types of things is something that people tend to miss in life, and also in being a trustee of a self-managed super. So I think the biggest one is getting the estate planning side of things sorted correctly. A lot of self-managed super funds are set up with an off-the-shelf deed, which most of the time is quite suitable, and a lot of the new ones cover off on most things that are required. But most of the time that will then nominate their power of attorney as a replacement trustee if they're incapacitated, or their executor as the replacement trustee if they pass. But a lot of the times that side of their estate planning hasn't been resolved or hasn't been thought through with the self-managed super fund in place. So I guess making sure you think about those sorts of things, what could go wrong. Most people tell me, oh, my family get along well, they'll all work together, they'll do the right thing. But inevitably, when there's a lot of cash around, that's when we see the worst in people. So we've always talked to clients over the years about the old Katz and Grossman case, which was where the daughter was appointed as a replacement trustee and there were no binding nominations. So she just gave all the money to herself without her brother accessing it. So we've always talked about the power of having a binding nomination, making sure you don't leave it to the replacement trustee's discretion. But I guess recently with the court ruling in Queensland, the ability for an attorney now, a power of attorney, to make a binding nomination on behalf of somebody could lead to the same result. So it's really important to look at, what does my trust deed say about my replacement trustees? Who are those people? Have I actually got the right documents in place on that side of my life? And what powers do they have? Like if I just set up an EPA because I'm comfortable with them there, are they going to jump into the self-managed super fund and make changes? And that could not end up with the results that I was hoping for on my death or my disability.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's often the simplest things that people sort of gloss over, unfortunately.
Well, and it's not necessarily simple, but I think a lot of times we ignore that we are going to die or that something can go wrong. It's always never going to happen to me. So I think as advisors, that's probably one of the things we get people to think about. They want to look at the investments and returns and things that are interesting and exciting today, and they can talk around the barbecue. But a really comprehensive estate plan is not something you normally talk to your mates about at a party or something. So, but they can lead to a lot of complexity and issues. Some of our clients say, I'll be dead, I don't care, but it can lead to a lot of issues in families for years to come. So it's something that we like to make sure is resolved up front, so that you are a bit more in control of what's going to happen.
Yeah, indeed. And right now, what do you find trustees struggling with the most as far as concerning issues go?
I was going to say, well, probably more so on what sort of do we see are the biggest issues when we meet new clients.
Yeah.
I guess the two bit, well, and ongoing as well, but the two biggest things we see with trustees as issues is, I guess, first one is not having a properly planned investment strategy. So an investment strategy is a compliance document. So a lot of times you'll see the old 0 to 100%, which might pass an audit, but isn't very useful in actually helping you have discipline to deal with what are you going to do when these types of things happen. And at the moment, obviously, there's a lot of volatility in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty, and not having that disciplined investment strategy can lead to a lot of emotional decisions, or the other side of it, people putting their head in the sand and going, oh, I'll just leave it as it is, I won't do anything, and not benchmarking that against what they could have got if they'd put it into an index fund or put into a different super fund. So I think that's a big one, is we set them up and it's like, okay, well, I'm interested, it's all going well, and I'm focused on it. Then I get busy in my life or my business and these other things, and we don't go back and go, all right, is it doing, we just tick the boxes. Yes, we passed the audit. Yes, we've checked the investment strategy, but is it really doing what we need it to do? Do we still need it to be a self-managed super fund? Are these the right investments for us? Are we getting closer to retirement? All those sorts of things need to have a bit of rigor around them. And we need to be able to sit down and go, make those tough decisions and go, okay, we made a mistake there. We need to make some changes. We can't just bury our head in the sand and hope it gets better, or ignore it and hope it goes away. So that's probably the biggest one. And I think with investing, familiarity bias is a big issue. So if we're used to property, we tend to have a lot of property in our portfolio. We tend to have a lot more Australian shares in self-managed super funds and little international diversification, those types of things, because we're used to it, we're comfortable with it. We think things that we're not familiar with are riskier, so we don't go and pursue those things and have that diversified portfolio. But we do know diversification helps, and generally your concentrated strategy can work well for a period of time, but if something goes wrong, you can have it all fall out at once. So we did have a client who had bought a lot of rental short stay apartment type investments in Melbourne. So because that was the key area, all those sorts of things, and then COVID hit and the valuations dropped, the rentals dropped, so everything basically was impacted, and they didn't have those other parts of the portfolio to be able to I guess offset those losses or be able to tap into those to fund their lifestyle. So that's the key, probably one. And I think at this moment in time, that diversified or disciplined investment strategy is more important than ever. And the other one, which I sort of alluded to there, is not properly reviewing the portfolio, your self-managed super fund each year or regularly. Is the deed still appropriate? Does it have any issues? Like there's a new court case out. Do we have to look at what our power of attorney powers are? Do we need to limit them to stop them being able to change our binding nominations? Are we actually benchmarking our returns? Are we doing better than we would have done if we were sitting in an industry fund or something like that? So having that sort of tough conversation with ourselves and addressing those sorts of things. The other big one we see is people paying like $3,500, $4,000 a year to do the tax return at the end of the year from a shoebox. Sort of here's all my statements, here's my tax return, where there's services out there now that can do daily admin, give you online portals to access up-to-date information, contributions, histories, all that sort of stuff to the day. And a lot of times they're sub $1,000, $400 or $500 for an audit. So just going through, is our insurance still appropriate? All that sort of stuff. The problem with being self-managed is if we get busy, a bit like the mechanic in their own car, we can put that to the side and go, yeah, it was right when I set it up, so I'll just leave it, keep going and come back to it someday. But you might be paying a lot more than you need to for things you don't need anymore. Or as I've got a lot of clients who are moving into the person who was driving the self-managed super fund and knew how it worked and was doing all the investments might be starting to lose capacity, and their partner needs to start to run it, and they just don't have the ability and things to do that. So looking at whether transitioning them into something that's managed for them and at a certain stage as well. So it's a tool that you can use for a job. It's not. It doesn't have to be a lifelong or a legacy thing that you pass down through the generations. It is something that you can switch off and stop using when it's not appropriate anymore.
Yeah. And if you could change one thing about the SMSF sector, what would it be?
I think my biggest one, as I said, I've probably got a different experience to a lot of other maybe specialist advisors who are just dealing with self-managed super fund and the more complex stuff. But we do get approached by a lot of people who have had their self-managed super set up for the wrong reasons. They don't have big enough balances to justify the costs. They set it up to buy a property, didn't buy the property and left the money sitting in cash, those types of things. And once again, got busy, left it there, never really got around to doing anything with it. So I would like to see, and I don't know if it's possible, but some sort of test or course or something that trustees need to do to be able to become a trustee of a self-managed super fund, because you can make mistakes, you can get fined, lose your compliance, and just not perform as well. If you'd left it to somebody else, you might have done a better job. So a lot of that going on. There's still people utilising loopholes to access funds through their super, so those types of things happening. But if we had a test that they had to do to pass to be able to get there, we'd see a lot less people having them or being taken advantage of. Is probably another issue that's happening at the moment. So.
And if I could get you to make a bold prediction in the coming year for the sector, what would it be?
I was unsure on this question whether you were looking at from a compliance or a regulatory point of view, or
it can be anything.
But I guess my concern, I was talking a little bit about it before, with the uncertainty out there in the world. My prediction is that there's going to be a lot of emotional decisions. There's going to be a lot of people either move to cash and not know when to get back into the markets. There'll be people who I spoke to some the other day that wanted to get out of their super because it was reducing money, move into a self-managed super to buy property because property had done all right recently, but it's sort of chasing last year's winners. So we get all these sort of behavioural issues where we're making bad decisions because what we're doing is not working at the moment. So I guess not having that patience or the knowledge or somebody from an outside point of view sitting down and talking through the different options and that sort of thing can lead to those mistakes, behavioural mistakes. and possibly delving into things that they don't really understand to try and get that back, say like cryptos and NFTs and all the popular things that are out there at the moment. So just bad investment decisions because of a lack of discipline and more emotion happening than anything.
Now we're going to open the floor up to questions for any of the viewers out there who have joined us. So if you could just submit your questions now, we'll put them forward to Mark, and hopefully he can give you his opinion and obviously a good answer on it. Just while we're waiting for that, Mark, I thought I'd just flesh out something a little bit more that you just touched on there around wanting to have some sort of mandatory trustee education course before they undertake the seriousness of being a trustee of their own superannuation fund. What sort of effect do you think then is that ATO trustee declaration right now? I know that trustees have to sign it before they embark on becoming a trustee of their self-managed super fund, but how it's not a very long document, obviously, but how seriously do people take it? Do people even know what the conditions sort of listed are there? How adequate are you seeing that?
I'll ask you a question. How much of your terms and conditions did you read on your last Apple update that came out? So I think, I think the problem is there's so much paperwork and things there that I don't know. I find people skim through a lot of things. They've got a result they're looking for, a bit like mortgage documents. As soon as you find something you love to buy, you tend to just do whatever you can to get it done as quickly as possible. So I know for ourselves, we do spend a lot of time talking to people about their responsibilities, what it means before we even get to that point. So when they ask, we want a self-managed super, it's like, why do you want it? Can we get that elsewhere? Do you have the skills and all those sorts of things to do it? And even though a lot of people go, well, I'm going to get someone else to do that for me, they've still got that responsibility. So making sure they understand that. But yeah, I'd say a lot of the people I'm talking to, most of them don't know why it was set up, why have signed paperwork, don't really understand what it is, never read their trust deed, that sort of stuff. So as I said, I don't know if I'm looking at a different sector of the market more regularly, but yeah, I'd say in most things, product disclosure statements, trust deeds, those types of things, people aren't having a good understanding of it. And when we talk to someone about the cost of coming on board as a client with a self-managed super fund, one of the things is we're going to read through your trust deed, make sure everything, and it's like, oh, okay, like didn't realise that was all important. So investment strategies and those sorts of things. So I think a lot of the times it's a tick and flick exercise, and people aren't giving it the required respect that it needs.
Yeah. I've got a question here from the audience, Mark, and I suppose it's a little bit related to you were talking about NFTs and that sort of thing being the flavour of the month or the flavour of the year, as far as people discussing what sort of investments that they want to allocate.
Maybe the flavour of last year a bit more, but yes, yeah.
But having said that, ethical investment choices are dominating a lot of discussions these days. So the question is, are you finding clients are looking more at ethical investment choices rather than pure returns?
Yeah, we have this conversation a lot. One of our fact find questions is exactly that, like, how important is it to you? Are you prepared to spend more to achieve it? Once again, I do have an interesting cross-section. A lot of our clients are working in the mining industry. So a lot of them are mining, drinking, smoking, doing all those sorts of things anyway. So a lot of them, it's obviously, it's important to people, but not enough to change their behaviours, I think, if that makes sense. So we do have some people where it is very important to them, yes, they are prepared to do it. We have recently, because obviously coal and some of those polluting industries and that have done really well over the last 12 months. So a lot of the ESG portfolios have lagged in returns because of that. So we've actually got a few clients at the moment that are reassessing their move into the ESG side of things. But what we tend to find when we ask that question, people go, I feel bad saying this, but I'll do those sorts of things in my own life. I just want to pick good investments, but people sort of are tending to be of the view that it's good for the companies to move down that path anyway, and companies are starting to move there. And it's not, when they understand, it's more getting rid of the bad investments rather than putting into new inventions and putting money towards things that are going to improve the world. It's not as important to them, we're finding, but that's our client base. So there's other clients that would definitely be going down that path.
No, that's a great take, particularly seeing that mining plays such an important part over in WA. We tend to ignore that in the eastern states.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a very interesting take on the different circumstances that people find themselves in and what jobs they occupy as well, as to influence those discussions, which is never discussed over here in the eastern states. So that's a great new take on it. Okay. Just another question, Mark. You mentioned reviewing strategies and documents, trust deeds, binding death benefit nominations, all those sorts of things. How regularly should people look to be doing that?
This is the $1 million question, isn't it? Obviously, annually would be perfect. To review, not to replace, I guess. Just because you're looking at it doesn't mean you actually need to go and get a new one, if that makes sense. But I think the problem is the tick and flick. So we've got to review our investment strategy. We've got to write minutes to do that. Generally, that gets done as part of your tax and accounting. But actually sitting down, having those conversations and have a real meeting about it. Is it invested the way we want? Are we doing well? Those sorts of things should definitely be done annually. I think where there are some major changes, so like the court case with the binding nominations, is that affecting it? Do we need to look at a new deed? Those types of things. So I think a new deed every few years, so 3 or 4 years is probably a good idea. But a lot of times they're written in a very generic way anyway, so they should cover most of the changes. But it's still good to make sure we're keeping up on those and just read them. Make sure you understand what your rule book is, because most of the time you're going along business as usual. You're not playing outside the flags. But when you do need to set up something like a pension or estate plan, those sorts of things, we do need to see how the deed covers that.
Yeah. And another question here, Mark, just about you spoke about fund wind-ups.
Yes.
How much understanding do your clients actually have of fund wind-ups, and what are some of the major considerations people should have when looking to wind up an SMSF?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of those review type questions that I'm talking about. So we had one recently. We've been working with the client. They were selling a commercial property, and once that happened, because he was losing capacity, that we were going to wind up the fund. But every time we went to do that, the accountant's like, "Oh no, don't wind up your fund. It's cheap. It's like cheaper than you can get elsewhere and all that sort of stuff." And I was like, And I kept showing them the numbers and going, no, look, it's definitely cheaper to do it elsewhere. And but I think some people sort of get caught up in this idea. 15 years ago, yes, if you had a certain balance, self-managed super funds were way cheaper, but a lot of things have changed out there. So it's important to look at that and understand it and get real figures, not just sort of hearsay, I guess. But yeah, so know whether you need it. So these guys, once they got rid of the commercial property, they didn't really have any need. They could do what they wanted to do in a managed fund or a managed super fund, I should say. So knowing whether you need it, having those conversations, and then looking at planning it out. So you always want to try and get it done before the end of the financial year, because you need to wind up your investments, move them to a new platform, keep some cash aside to pay the taxes that you're going to have due, the accounting fees, the audit fees, all those sorts of things. So generally what we do is plan to try and close it before the end of financial year. If you miss, then you're going to have to do another one for the part year that it's there and pay your fees again. So plan it out, work out how you're going to sell down, working closely with the accountant as well, sell the investments or in specie them, and then keep the money, work out how much you're going to need to keep aside. Do your rollover benefit statements, get the new funds out there. You'll need to work out how much is in each account. So member balances and all those sorts of things need to be calculated. And then it is it's a careful process that you need to plan out and work with your accountants and make sure it's all done very well.
Now, during our conversation a little bit earlier, you mentioned Katz versus Grossman, which is a very iconic case as far as estate planning goes and binding death benefit nominations. Got a question here that's seized on another High Court case, which has happened recently. That's the Hill versus Zuda case, and of course that was referring to binding death benefit nominations again. And the question is, are you seeing problems with binding death benefit nominations? And if so, what are the main issues that are arising?
Seen with that, so I get these sorts of things. It's not going to be today that you see them. You're going to come across them rarely, and generally it's going to be one of those things. It's probably more the lawyers that would be dealing with that. But binding nominations to me are very important to have in place if they're done properly. So that's the other key for self-managed super. What does your trust deed say about your binding nominations? Are you allowed to do them? What is the format that they need to be in? Does the trustee need to accept them or not? Those sorts of things. So you need to sort of understand what's valid. Make sure that they're part of the paperwork that you've got. So it's all well and good having them hidden off somewhere that nobody knows about. So make sure they're very front and centre. So I guess this sort of thing from the High Court case, it's only going to really come into effect in very a few circumstances, but the power of attorney, if they only come into effect if someone loses capacity, then obviously that limits the abilities for them to do it. If they've got full powers from day one, obviously somebody could go and figure out what was going on and make changes to them without the person's knowledge. So I think getting them in place, so that the issue with that court case is that somebody else can go and update it and change it and make it themselves. If you lose capacity, they become your trustee. They then change your binding nominations as well. And if you pass, then they can basically pay out the money to themselves rather than going to somewhere else. But if you don't have them, then the trustees have that discretion anyway. So it's not going to happen in all cases. A lot of times it'll pass to a spouse or something like that. Where it is those circumstances, it can happen. So I don't know if that answers the question, but.
I thought I'd just quickly ask you about downsizer. You mentioned that a lot of your client base is made up of retirees.
Yes.
Have they seized on the opportunity to make downsizer contributions? Because they have been very popular up until now.
Sure, yeah. We've probably only had one or two over the years. Obviously, that was prior to the reduction in the ages and things, so it might become more popular now. But a lot of the people we're working with still have a bit of room in their non-concessional caps anyway, so they've put a lot of the money into super that they are going to. So it hasn't had a huge impact on what we've done with clients up until now. But yeah, with the lowering of the ages, it might be more relevant. I think the issue we've had with a couple of people who are going to use it for is that the 10-year rules and having used it for investments and things like that during the time and that sort of things limited it. So yeah, it's not been very well. As I said, in our client base, we haven't used it a lot.
Okay, well, I think we're just about out of time now. So I'd just like to thank you for joining us on the Fast Five today, Mark. Your perspectives were very interesting. And just obviously a reminder too that if you didn't get your questions in, you can always post them to the Facebook community that we have, as you can see the details on the screen now. And Mark or any of the other people that we've had on the Fast Five with us will jump on there and answer them for you. Just very quickly, our next Fast Five session is likely to be held in November, so please watch out for that one. We don't have an exact date as yet, but it will be scheduled to be around November. If we can squeeze one in before the end of the year. And just a shout out to practitioners who want to be a part of the Fast Five experience. Please email us at events@bmarkmedia.com.au, or you can reach us via the SMS Trustee News Facebook page via the Messenger facility. You can see all of the prompts on the screen now. You can scan those QR codes if you want to get in touch with us as well. And obviously, we welcome anybody to come and join us on this initiative that we're having. We're building a pretty good community as it stands right now, and a lot of people are submitting questions to the advisors that we have had on the Fast Five previously. If you cannot access the community, though, you can always email us or email myself, and I will forward that question or any questions that you have to the community. They will give you an answer, and then I'll make sure that the answer gets back to you. Apart from that, I'd just like to, one last thing, as you can see on the slide there, if you'd like to subscribe to SMS Trustee News, you can access the website on screen now and hit the subscribe button, and you can receive the newsletter. It comes out fortnightly. We don't put anything behind a paywall, so it's free for you, and it will give you a great cross-section of news if you're a trustee about compliance issues, about any sort of strategies, such as estate planning strategies, and investment news as well. So it should help you navigate your way through some of these troubled economic times that we're seeing right now. So please go to the website, have a look at it, and click on the subscribe button if you want to receive that fortnightly newsletter. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for your company. We hope that you've found it very useful. And again, thanks to Mark for joining us on the Fast Five today. Great commitment, got up early to be with us today. So thank you very much, Mark, for joining us from WA. It's been great to have you.
I was going to say, make me sound like I sleep in till very late in the day. It's only 9 a.m, so it's not too bad. So, but thanks for having me. It's gone quickly, and yeah, it's been enjoyable. So thanks for your time.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.